Hi. When I was growing up, my parents tried to raise me to be a good person. They taught me to be honest, to share, to be kind, and so on and so forth. And that's what I did. And then when I got into, well, when I got into middle school, my, I guess you could say, faith or my system that they had inculcated into me was sorely tested. I had a small number of classmates who would bully me, um, maybe like 0.5% or less of the total number of students that I was around would bully me. Um, so my upbringing had taught me that I should be nice even to them. And unfortunately, um, for whatever reason, I was not taught that bullies are victims who are lashing out at people around them, often people who match the very same traits that they used to have and were bullied for. Because they came to believe that because of the abuse that they endured for their traits, that those traits were bad traits. And so, since they learned that if person A has this trait, you abuse the person this way, that's what they do to other people. Not realizing, of course, that all they're doing is really just passing along the virus of the abuse. And not just hurting the victims, but also hurting themselves. The rate of suicide is very high, much higher than the average person amongst both bullies and victims. Anyway, so I was still being kind and generous to the bullies. So if a bully came up to me and asked me to borrow a pencil, I would lend a pencil. And eventually, I got really fed up with it. Around eighth grade, I started pushing back. Not fighting necessarily, but just if a bully came to me and asked for a pencil, I would say no. And that was partially because they were bullying me, but also because they wouldn't necessarily return what they had borrowed. And I got tired of it. So really, it was unfortunately my reaction to that minority of students who were not nice to me, were taking advantage of me, was that I would go to the other extreme, I guess you could say. Not really to the other extreme, but I pushed back harder than was actually necessary, and kind of hardened my heart. And so there was a lot of pain inside of me, and it took a long time to realize that yes, there were bullies who bullied me, but it would have been a minority, and the majority of the pain was because I accepted into myself and exaggerated the amount of pain I was receiving. And I'm not really sure why. My mom and my dad, they tried to help me to put it into perspective, but I guess what they said wasn't what I needed to hear. I'm not really sure. But eventually I came to realize that I had overreacted to the pain that I had experienced, and that had magnified that pain to a much greater degree than was real, and that contributed heavily to depression and how I felt about the world and stuff like that. I just didn't have, I guess you could say, the mechanisms or whatever to react more appropriately to what was going on, and it took me literally decades until I was in my probably late 40s before I got that sorted out in my head. So when people say, "Oh, bullying, it's okay," the principal isn't doing anything about it, the teachers aren't doing anything about it, they're wrong, because bullying isn't okay, and it can have massive effects on people. Um, the victims need help, and so do the bullies. Um, and anybody who says otherwise is an idiot and should be removed from their position within a school system or wherever the bullying is occurring. It is horribly destructive. It shouldn't be allowed in prison systems either, because all it does is create people who are very hardened. It takes a mild criminal and turns them into a hardened criminal. It's really very, very, very dangerous. Um, but anyways, the point I want to get to here is that if you've been raised to be a good person, a nice person, sharing and caring and loving and honest and things like that, the world is full of people who were not raised that way. Anywhere from people who were raised just to be, less than what you were raised to be, to people who were raised to be very violent and self-serving and psychopathic and all that. And since you may be on the farther toward the end of good, I guess you could say, than a lot of other people, you're going to really feel it over time. It's really going to be frustrating for you, and you are going to be sooner or later you're going to start to feel like, well, why the hell should I continue to be this nice? My parents were obviously wrong. People are taking advantage of me. They're walking over me. They're treating me like crap. So why shouldn't I just toughen up and be like the rest like all these assholes who are making me miserable? And therein is the trap. Because you have to remember that what you have internalized in your as a belief system, as a way of living, doesn't just get erased because you're frustrated and you want to give up on it. It doesn't get erased just because you've been beaten down. Okay? Now, some people, they'll get to a point where they're like, well, I don't want to be like them. I'm never going to be like them, but I can't deal with this anymore. And they'll end their lives. And that's a sad tragedy. And other people will harden themselves to one degree or another, or even become like the people that they hate. So the problem is then you have this externalized reaction to the way you've been treated by some of the people around you, or maybe most of the people. It depends on where you are, what kind of culture you're stuck in. And the internalized system of beliefs that you've got. And when you think you should be like this, but you're acting like this creates a clash. It creates guilt. It creates anxiety and sadness. It can lead to depression. It can lead to self-hatred. It can lead to anger. It can lead to you lashing out at others because you hate yourself so much that you're trying to just, I don't know, it's almost like as a consequence of you creating this clash in yourself and despising yourself that much that your pain just gets, you're just like splashing it on everybody else. So if you do that, you're going to end up being very unhappy, and you might kill yourself. And you're thinking, well, Glenn, what are you talking? I mean, how would you know? Well, I did that. Maybe not to the extreme that some people have done it. But, like if you look at a criminal, and the criminal seems to be showing some behaviors that indicate some level of conscious or unconscious regret. Maybe they often have ulcers or other health problems keep on surfacing, or they're very nervous, or they never seem happy, or they're always striking out at people. These people are people who have been unable to reconcile what they know they should be doing in regards to themselves and others, and what they are doing. If you take those steps to become a meaner person, you're not only hurting the world and you're not only hurting everybody around you, and depending on the scale of your accessibility to the general population, the amount of negative impact on the population can be massive. Like when a politician is repeatedly disrespectful to other politicians and other people, this is televised, it's reported on by the news. This has an immediate and very negative impact on at least that society. There will be those who will be like, oh my God, what a horrible human being. And there will be those who are like, well, the president or that senator or that representative or judge or whoever it is behaves like this. So obviously, if these highly respected leaders of ours, if it's okay for them to behave like that, well, then obviously we can behave and should behave that same way. We should follow their example. So not only are you creating a dissonance inside of yourself that slowly destroys you and makes you literally hate yourself, but when you lash out at the world or at people around you, people who love you, you're spreading that dissonance, that destruction into your environment, and making the environment that made you turn that way into something even worse than it was. And when you do it on a national or international scale like politicians do, your impact is huge and it's very dangerous. So all of these politicians you see who demonstrate behavior that's negative, that's destructive, or the media finds a way to make this something that's in the public eye, that harms to a lesser degree. When the person lacks the self-control to not behave that way in the public eye, that is really bad. You should never, honestly, never, ever vote for a divisive politician. You should never vote for a me versus them politician. You should never vote for a politician who is singling out groups of people as bad because they're different. Because these people are following the same pattern, and maybe they're not going to be as bad, but they're following the same pattern as people like Mao Zedong and Stalin and Hitler and these other people, Jim Jones, and there's a huge list of leaders of people who have used fear and hatred and divisiveness to tear communities, to tear cities, to tear states, to tear entire countries apart for their own benefit. So you may have anger, and you may make the mistake of assuming that just because one person did something to you, everybody who looks like that person is the same and will do the same. But you're wrong. And when somebody does bad things to you, and then many people do bad things to you, and you feel like, well, I've got to just lash out at everybody because they're lashing out at me, you're just making it worse. And worst of all, you're making it worse for yourself. Yes, you may be unhappy in your position as being victimized, but you're going to be even more unhappy if you take the step to start being an aggressor. Now you may feel at first you may feel that I'm free now. I'm an aggressor. I'm the wolf. But that inner self, that part of you that has been taught to behave in a more gentle way, isn't going to just disappear, and it's going to cause you to suffer, to make yourself suffer. My wife had a cousin, and we were at a family get-together. One of the family members was rich and had taken us all somewhere, and we had this nice time together. And it was very nice, but I saw one of her cousins. She was younger. She was like, I don't know, maybe 18. And she wasn't dressed the way Muslims dress, because my wife was Muslim and her family was Muslim. And, she was an attractive young lady, but she was dressing in an inappropriate way, but that wasn't the point. Because I'm not Muslim, and it didn't bother me. But what bothered me was I could tell that she was not happy. So I went to her and I asked her what was wrong. And she gave me enough information that I realized that this was what was happening to her. What I'm talking about with you is what was happening to her and what had happened to me. So I told her, look, what I'm telling you, when you live your life in conflict with what you believe is right, you suffer and you come to hate yourself. And eventually, if you don't stop, you'll lash out at other people. The next time I saw her, she was no longer dressing the way she had been dressing. She was dressing like a Muslim woman was expected to dress, which, that's if that's what she felt she needed to do, that's her choice. But the point is that she was no longer miserable. She was happy. And I wish I could tell you that up until this day she's still happy. Unfortunately, she's dead. She died in a horrible motorcycle accident because her husband was driving recklessly. But that was a sad day, because I really liked her. Look, there are people who are going to shit on you, and there are going to be people who will take advantage of you and use you and try to rip you off. People who will hurt you. People who will control you. People who will, in one way or another, victimize you, in other words. If you react strongly and swing toward that direction of aggression, of abuse, of misuse, of victimizing others, you just become like them and you'll become miserable. So instead of swinging to that side of things, just modify your behavior. There are things that you can do. The way you walk, the way you talk, the way you position your body. These all send nonverbal and verbal messages to people to let them know whether you are going to be an easy victim, a difficult victim, or not a victim at all. If you see that somebody's trying to take advantage of you or somebody's treating you disrespectfully and you shut them down politely, except for the people who are looking to troll others, that's going to help. I mean, I was working at Feeding America in Milwaukee, and the volunteer supervisor who was above me was disrespectful. And I understand that he was a recovering alcoholic, and that he was dealing with a lot of people who were ex-convicts and people who were on support and not very grateful for the support that they had to do to get the support. They were not grateful about being there. Because part of the condition of them getting the support, and mine as well, was that you had to work to get that support. And it was very minimal money. I mean, it was below minimum wage, but it was something. But a lot of these, there were plenty of people who were ungrateful and they were lazy. They would go and hide and play on their phones. They would walk around. They would do everything they could to avoid it. Or, they'd get angry easily or whatever. And so he had to deal with this every day. But one day he was giving me crap. And I was like, look, I'm educated. I went to university. I have a degree. I've been overseas. And I'm not like the average person you're dealing with here, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd knock it off. And he did. Well, mostly. I mean, sometimes he slipped, but for the most part, after that, he treated me with a lot more respect, and he gave me more responsibilities. And it got to the point where him and our boss would look to me and say, you know what, we have to go to another part of the building. We want you to be in charge while we're gone. Because they knew they could rely on me. And so there are, when you talk about body, using your body, if you do like this, it tends to send a message that, oh, you're kind of scared or something, you're defensive. That means for some people that you're a victim. Whereas if you're standing confidently in postures that are large and expansive and confident looking, they're less likely to come after you. Because they say, aha, here's somebody who's going to put up maybe too much resistance. If you talk in certain ways, if there's a lot of negativity coming out of you, that's another signal. If you're thinking very negatively, that is going to affect the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you move, everything. It isn't even going to affect not just your decisions, but your outcomes. Because you will abandon outcomes before even attempting to get to them. I know this because I speak from personal experience. Because around 8th grade, I started moving in the direction of aggression. Not very far, but far enough that I started to hate myself. And despise myself because some of the things that I was doing I knew were wrong, or I believed were wrong at some level. And I became a harder person. But at the same time, I still had the victim mentality. I still had that negativity in my head that, I'd see a good-looking woman and I'd be like, I want to talk to her. I'd really like to, talk to her and get to know her and see if she's a good person or not. But then I was like, there's no way a woman like that would ever want to talk to me. See, I had no real conception of whether or not I was handsome. In fact, I thought I was not handsome. And for you trolls out there who are about to comment, don't bother. I don't care what you think. I would just shut that whole thought process down. I would give up before I started. Or maybe there'd be some kind of a situation where I would be like, well, I guess I'm too late. And come to find out, if I had just made an inquiry at the time that I thought I was too late, I wasn't actually too late. I could have still gotten or achieved whatever it was that was available. But I gave up. In most situations, there are a range of possibilities. So like if you're on the street and some guy comes at you with a gun and says, give me your money or I'm going to kill you. And then I'll take your money. You have a range of options. Option number 1 is do exactly what he says. But he may still kill you. Option number 2 is to defy him. Option number 3 is to fight him. Option number 4 is to run away. Option number 5 is to try and make him feel guilty so he'll leave you alone. Start crying. Next option, scream as loudly as you can for help. And so on and so on and so on. There are always more options. But when you are thinking negatively, when you're a pessimist, or even a realist for that matter, because a realist tends to be a pessimist in denial, you will eliminate most of those options from consideration immediately. You'll be like, nope, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. But in reality, you're not saying that you can't do that because you can't do it. You're assuming you can't do it. You're assuming that you will fail. And therefore, you eliminate those options. Again, this is from personal experience. I speak about what I know from personal experience. So I had to learn to stop having the victim mentality, stop walking like a victim, stop talking like a victim, and finally to stop thinking like a victim. I had to learn to enjoy getting up in the morning, which I hated doing. I had to learn to get up at 4 in the morning for my current job. I didn't want to have to get up at 4 in the morning. I'm a night person. I love to stay up late. But I did. I had to learn to like celery and peanuts and raw carrots and raw tomatoes and all kinds of other stuff. Bell peppers that I did not like. Nuts in general. I mean, it's just like, but I did. Because it was never impossible. It was a choice. I had to learn to stop complaining. I came back from Indonesia. My wife was dead. My children and I were grieving over her. I was traumatized by the behavior of her family toward me. They'd tried to get me kicked out of the country. One of them was trying to hire an assassin. They tried to get me blacklisted so they could steal my children, and I wouldn't be able to get back into the country to fight that, and so on and so forth. And I was whiny. And I realized it, and I asked a friend, am I whining a lot? And she said, yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but yeah. Which is ironic, because when we started talking again, she was really whiny. But I helped her. So since then, I have worked on not being a whiner. Which honestly is important, because here's the strange thing. When something comes out of your mouth, do you know where it goes? It goes into the air, right? And some of it travels through your bones back to your ears, and some of it travels through the air back to your ears. And when that happens, your message to the world is also a message to your brain. So when your message is negative, you are reinforcing the negativity in your brain. Now, I'm not saying that you should say things that are unrealistic, unreasonable. I'm not saying that, you should take on this I can do anything kind of attitude. But you should definitely explore your real limits. You should definitely try to find out what you really can and can't do. And until you push yourself, you won't know. Simple experiment for you to try. In order to do this experiment, I'm going to need you to stand up. Okay? And I'm going to need you to grab 2 things that you can see easily if you put them on the floor. And if there's somebody in the room with you, ask them to help you. And those are going to be markers. So what I'm going to ask you to do is stand, and I want you to imagine that your feet are nailed to the floor. Now make sure that if you're wearing something that's going to make your feet slip around, that you remove it so that your feet are solidly planted on the floor. They're not going to twist or anything like that or slip. And also, if what I'm describing is something that could potentially injure you because of an existing condition, such as you've got you've got a current injury of the spine or something like that, I would highly recommend that you hold off doing this until you consult a doctor, your professional who knows about the condition intimately and can advise you as to whether what I am going to say is safe or not. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to lift up one arm in front of you like this, and then I want you to start turning. And I want you to keep on turning as far as you possibly can. Every part of your body can turn, and I suggest you even flex your knees a bit. Don't keep them straight. Kind of bend your knees and allow them to swivel a bit, but just only your feet are not allowed to move from their position. If you need to, draw a chalk around them to make sure you're not doing it wrong. And just keep on twisting as far as you possibly can. And then ask the person with you, and it's much better if you have somebody helping you. Ask the person with you to put a marker underneath the position of your hand. So get that hand wrapped around your body as much as you possibly can until there's some, you're going to feel some pressure. You might feel some discomfort. But as long as you're not, feeling things snap, hearing things crack or anything like that, you're going to be okay. All right? And heck, if you want to, do some stretching exercises before you start. When you get twisted around as far as you can, tell that person, put that down underneath where my hand is right now. And then unwind yourself. Come back to normal position. Maybe wiggle yourself a little bit to loosen up. If you feel parts that are not feeling right, you can just kind of move your body around. Then I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to say this to yourself. I give myself permission to move farther. 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 And with your eyes closed, I want you to, again, you're going to keep your eyes closed until I tell you to open them, okay? You're going to imagine yourself turning, just like you did in reality, but you're not going to move your body. You just move your body in your imagination only up here in your head. And you're going to see yourself twisting beyond the point where the marker is on the floor. And the marker might be over here at the 3 o'clock position. It may be all the way over at the 9 o'clock position. I don't care. Move it, your hand, your imaginary hand in your head beyond that point. It can be as far beyond that point as you want. I don't care how much farther it is, because it's only in your imagination. It's not your real body. You can do a 360 if you want to. And then I want you to tell yourself again, I give myself permission to move farther 5 times, and do it again in your imagination. And then 5 times you say that to yourself, and you imagine twisting farther again. Once you've done that 5 times, so 5 times of speaking, I give myself permission to move farther, and 5 times of imagining moving farther. Once you've done that whole thing 5 times, I want you to relax and open your eyes. And then I want you to raise your arm up. And I want you to twist again as far as you possibly can. Get that hand as far around you as you can. Now remember, your hand has to stay like this. You can't flip it over. You have to keep it like this. Okay? You're kind of defeating it if you're flipping over, because that gives you a different range of motion that might be better and might be worse. So keep it with the palm down. And when you get as far as you absolutely can, I want you to have your partner put a marker underneath where your hand is. Now, I should have mentioned this before, but I'll say it now. Your markers should not be identical. They should be different somehow. Could be different color, could be different shapes, different sizes. It doesn't matter, so long as it's going to be a good marker underneath the position of your hand. Once you've twisted again, unwind yourself. Standing straight, loosen yourself up. If anything doesn't feel right, try to get it so it feels right. Maybe massage it a little or rotate it or something. It sometimes happens. I've done this with anywhere from a child of about 6 years old up to a 70-year-old man. Not that it matters whether it was a man or a woman. And I've done this with hundreds of people. What you should notice in almost every case is that there is a difference between the first marker and the second marker as far as position. They should not be in the same place, and certainly unless you were not in a physical condition to do this in the first place and should not have done it, the second marker shouldn't be over, have a lesser distance around your body. Now, if you notice a lesser difference, then you shouldn't have done the exercise, because that process of giving yourself permission and imagining yourself turning causes your body to loosen up your muscles and allows you to turn more. When your muscles get tighter because of doing it the second time, that's an indication that you should not have done the exercise without consulting your doctor. And if you didn't know you needed to consult your doctor, you should go see your doctor. But everybody that I've done this with the exception of one or two people who had something going on, they were able to get it beyond that first position. That was one or two people were at the same position the second time. Now there are two possible reasons. One of the reasons, as I said, is you've got a condition. Second reason is you were resisting very strongly in your mind when you twisted the second time. See, the point of this exercise is we don't really know what we can do. We don't really know our limits. And so as long as you're negative and you keep on saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, you're right, you can't. As long as you think to yourself things like that are negative, that are self-limiting, you will never win at something you're trying to achieve. You will never be that person. It's like watching people on Fear Factor. Some people would just allow their fear or their disgust to overwhelm them. They'd fail on the fear part of it, or they'd fail on the disgust part of it, or they'd fail on the physical part of it. Now, granted, sometimes the physical part of it was not fair for people of certain body types. But, if you've watched Fear Factor, you know what you're getting into. And even with like Ultimate Ninja or whatever those programs are, where you see people doing these crazy obstacle courses, it's partially just because of mentality. What does this mean? What does this have to do with what I was talking about shifting from being a nicer person to not nice person? Well, it should be obvious. But just in case, the point here is that if you have a negative attitude, you have to shift your mental attitude to a more positive one. So you may want to be like this, but because of the abuse you've endured, the victimization, you are mentally like this. And you start to harden yourself, so you actually become in line with this negative mentality you've developed, becomes mirrored in your behavior toward others. You need to shift both of them enough in this direction so that people realize this is not a person to mess with. Without you having to be aggressive, without you having to be violent, without you having to say mean things or victimize anybody else. without you contributing negatively to the world, people will realize this is not somebody I can easily victimize. I'm going to go find an easier victim. So once you can align these things and put them in the position where you are able to easily move along in your life without a lot of crap from people, things are going to go a lot more smoothly. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, because those people out there who are hurting themselves, inside of themselves, and who are hurting others as a consequence, are still going to be out there. But maybe you can say, hey, there's this video I want you to take a look at. You might find it helpful. And they may watch this video, or you may have a better video than this. I'm certainly not the best video creator. And that may help that person. And it may not. But at least you made an effort to help that person in the only way possible. But remember, the only person you can truly help, the only person, and this is a very painful lesson for some of us, because we really want to help others. The only person you can truly help is yourself. Now, the only people you have a great deal of influence over are children. When your child is young, until they start going through puberty, it's a great time to teach them to be good people and to arm them with this information like what I'm giving you, so that they don't go out into the world and become hurtful people and hurting people. But once they hit that puberty, oh my gosh, it's a whole different ball game, and you have lost your opportunity. And it's just gone. Yeah. So I really hope that you will share this, especially with young people, because they're the ones who need to know the most. You have, you obviously, maybe you need to know this too really badly, but young people are less prepared and less aware of what the world can be like, how horrible things can be. Stand up for yourself. Don't let your boss shit all over you. Don't let your friends shit all over you, because they're obviously not all your friends. Don't let people walk over you, but you don't have to be mean. Just firm, just confident, and positive. Realistically positive. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day.